it's actually funny to, whenever I tell people this, like, I mean, I am not a natural stage performer at all, right? Like, I mean, one of the main reasons I do burlesque at all is because it's way out of my comfort zone. There's nothing less comfortable to me than being naked in a room full of like people in a bar, right? But I do it because I'm pushing myself, and I do love the art form. So. Um, Hi, yeah, so my name is Sharp Robert. I'm originally from Detroit. Um, Graduated high school, joined the military, bounced around the world a bit, ended up somehow in New York for 10 years, and I've been here in Philly for probably 2. Since moving to Philly, I've become like a burlesque performer and producer, and like these are things that probably I wouldn't have gotten into if I had stayed in New York. There's just like a lot of creative energy and like a opportunity to do things in Philly that the scenes feel a little more crowded in New York than they do here, and there's just a lot of opportunity here. Right, so burlesque is sort of the artist striptease. I'm a burlesque performer and producer, and what I do is specifically called Nerdlesque. So what that is sort of taking ideas or stories or characters even from pop culture, comic books, cartoons, television shows, almost anything you can think of, and sort of reinterpreting them in a burlesque context. So a lot of people, when they think of burlesque, they sort of think feather fans and sort of sparkly costumes, and that totally exists, and that's prevalent. But when I think of burlesque, I think lightsabers and Star Wars, or like I see a movie that I really enjoy, and I'm like, man, I really want to like somehow pay homage to that concept or that idea, or there's a creator or writer or anything, and just sort of reinterpret that in a striptease context. And it's definitely a niche market, but it's becoming pretty popular. I mean, there's a few different Nerdlesque shows here in Philadelphia that do pretty well, I think, and I think there's value to it. So yeah. So when I was living in New York, this is the story of the first burlesque show I ever went to. And it's pretty, I think it's a funny story. I was sitting around at home, in bed, just like not doing anything. It was like a Thursday night, and I was looking at the Time Out New York, and I saw a article for a burlesque show called Joss Whedon Burlesque. And I was kind of like, I didn't even know what that meant. Like, what does it mean, a Joss Whedon burlesque show? But I was curious enough and a big enough fan of Joss Whedon to just, throw on a shirt and pants and like trek across town and like walk in and check it out. Changed my life. From then on, I was at 2 or 3 burlesque shows a week for going on 4 or 5 years. And at a certain point, people see you around, you get to know people. And I remember specifically, I believe it was Poison Ivory, who is actually the reigning queen of burlesque, who turned to me and said, I bet you in a year, you're gonna be on the stage. And I was like, I don't know, probably not, right? Well, a year later, I was on the stage, and and I had a blast. First time, absolute wreck, train wreck, right? I was shaking, nervous, like I can't even remember the act that I did right now, right? Got on stage, immediately forgot my choreography, but burlesque audiences are forgiving, and they want you to succeed. So I kept doing it, hopefully got a little bit better. And now, now it's a regular thing for me. Now, instead of doing a show every month, I'm doing, 9 shows a month. And my concepts are getting clearer and maybe even a little bit more complex, but that's good. That just means I'm developing my artwork, so yeah. So, influences. Influence is an interesting question because, that there's definitely people, right, that I respect and really look up to in burlesque. I mean, 2 names that pop out immediately to me are Nasty Canasta and Danger Doll. Nasty is pretty funny. She has a tagline she uses that she invented burlesque. Or she's been ruining burlesque for the last 20 years. She's amazing. She does things like fan dances to car alarms, right? It's just like things that you wouldn't think are plausible. She somehow makes happen on the stage, and it's really intense and amazing to watch. Danger Dow is a performer who I wouldn't totally classify her as a Nerdlesque performer because she also does classic stuff and neo burlesque stuff. So her Nerdlesque is probably sort of what I aspire to the most, of the performers that I see around. It's just amazing to watch. Otherwise, influences, it can come from anywhere, right? I'm influenced by comic books, I'm influenced by movies, my favorite director is Michel Gondry. I watch his films and I'm just wow. And it just inspires me to just take things a step or 2 further than I normally would, because hey, they did it, so it must be possible. So instead of just doing an act where I sort of dress as a character and take my clothes off, instead, I try and dig into the character's head, because that's what I see other people doing that I find the most affecting. So just trying to be original, but then take in the influence of other people it's a complex process. I don't know. Favorite movie. This is another tough question. There's a lot of directors out there that I think are amazing. Names pop to mind Wes Anderson, Stanley Kubrick. I think I would have to say, just out of pure enjoyment and rewatchability factor, it's probably a movie like The Royal Tenenbaums. There's just something about how dysfunctional everyone in that film is that really appeals to me. Also, just the way that Wes Anderson films things is fascinating to me. It's all very precise and sort of mathematical. I remember hearing a story about how he approached an actor for a role in the Grand Budapest Hotel, and the actor was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. He's like, oh, but I need you to come to my house real quick. And so actor visits Wes Anderson's house, and Wes Anderson had already made the movie in animatics and said, no, we're just gonna, but this is what the movie is already made, and that's just mind-blowing to me, the amount of detail that he's willing to go into, and it really shows when you're sitting in a theater and watching his films. So collaborations. First thing that pops to my mind is Michel Gondry. He's just like a fantastic director. I don't understand how his brain works, but it's amazing. Like, I mean, you watch a movie like The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and you just see, like, oh man, just the way he films things with practical, like, effects is mind-blowing to me. And his music video work is just, it's just outstanding. I mean, I just want to have coffee with the dude, right? Like, you know, like I would sit down and have a beer with him. Like I wouldn't even know what to work on with him, but like, you know, I would just love to know like what his stream of consciousness is like, you know, just because he's just an amazing creative to me. So when it comes to like music and musicians, my tastes are all over the place, like a lot of people's. I grew up mainly with hip hop, you know, like I mean, favorite MC of all time. It's probably a toss up between like either Nas or Rakim, you know. I think lately the sort of things I've been listening to more are, I would say, are more in the vein of like Radiohead and like Tom York, like the lead singer of Radiohead. I think he's just like a genius as a writer, right? And a lot of his music sort of speaks to me in that it's a lot about just being conflicted about like your place in the world and things like that. I just think he's brilliant in the way he pulls things off. And I love Radiohead really because every album they're a whole new band. You know, like I mean, every album they're trying something completely different. Doesn't always work, but it almost doesn't matter because I appreciate the fact that this is like one of the biggest bands in the world, and every album they're still trying to do something to push themselves and do something different. A lot of people don't like Kanye West. I'll tell you what, I like Kanye West. You wanna know why? Because he is one of the few hip hop artists, at least, you know, with his level of fame, that actually attempts to do something that's sort of out of the box, right? Every time it's out of the box. He's a horrible human being, but as an artist, you gotta respect the fact that every album he's trying something different. Bringing in just like completely new influences and just pushing the box just to see what'll happen. Doesn't always work again, but you gotta respect the fact that they try. Yeah, so we were talking about Eminem, and the funny thing about Eminem is, I remember back in the day, like, you know, 92, 93, like there's this place in Detroit called the Hip Hop Shop, right? And, you know, they were basically a glorified t-shirt shop, but it's like where everybody hung out because, you know, it was the hip hop shop, and hip hop was like, you know, it was booming in 92, right? And on Sundays, they used to have these like sort of tournament style battles. And I mean, it's not quite like 8 Mile, but you know, it's happening in the middle of the afternoon, but I'm pretty sure a lot of his inspiration for 8 Mile came from those Sunday battles at the hip hop shop where, you know, I mean, the first few times I saw him, he got knocked out in the second or third rounds, and then just like, you know, the third or fourth time you see the guy, like, he's unbelievable all of a sudden, like overnight, you know? And yeah, nobody could touch him back then, and then still, like, I mean, he's dope, man. Like, he's undeniable, you know? So I think for me what's most important is, so burlesque is obviously it's sort of a nightlife thing. So being entertaining is really important, right? I mean, even though you're challenging yourself as an artist, you still have to be entertaining to the people in the room, or at least challenging to them. I also like to challenge myself as an artist by sort of pushing the boundaries of what I'm comfortable with. It's actually funny to, whenever I tell people this, like, I mean, I am not a natural stage performer at all, right? Like, I mean, one of the main reasons I do burlesque at all is because it's way out of my comfort zone. There's nothing less comfortable to me than being naked in a room full of like people in a bar, right? But I do it because I'm pushing myself, and I do love the art form. So every time is a challenge, and I think though it's made me into sort of a better person in general, like a little less in my shell than where I was like 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah, so I mean, for me, it's always just sort of like pushing outside of my own box and seeing how far I can take it that time. I mean, I think the only thing I would say to people who are sort of thinking of doing sort of anything in a creative space, but like sort of having trouble getting over that hump, is like, the biggest thing stopping you is you and your own self-doubt. And like, look, the community here is wildly supportive, and you know, you just gotta get yourself out there. Once you're out there, I mean, you'll be surprised at how quickly you find yourself, like, you know, finding your own community and like your own family almost within the creative spaces. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, and like, hey, be a part of it.